the waiting room?
Yes, and we are now recording.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to be here. We know that it's difficult to get everybody together. So this is being recorded, so if you have to drop off early or if you weren't able to attend, that's totally okay. We understand. This meeting is set up to be a table lead and coaches training. If you've been a table lead or a coach before, it is still important to listen to the whole recording because, as you know, we always are iteratively improving. And we do have some updates. Okay, if you are on, let's make sure we're on mute. Chelsea, you can always, as the host, mute people as well. Our webinar norms are designed not to keep you quiet. We do want to hear from you if you have questions, so please use the chat box. The norms are to help us with recording quality. So videos off helps with the bandwidth, mute helps with the volume. Please use your chat box. Our intent is to have the recording out to you on Friday at the end of the day so that you'll have all the materials that you need. Our agenda for today is to go over the workshop goals, to give you an overview of some of our process updates, and then also to review the roles of coaches and table leads. So this is, we've had the table lead handbook for a while, and we've iterated, improved it, and given more detail each workshop. And this is the first workshop that we are going to have a handbook handout for the roles of the coaches. So thank you to the accessibility team for helping us put that together. Our workshop goals. So this workshop, our goal is to complete, we're working towards the Tools for Teachers launch in September, and our goal is to complete 36 connections playlists. This will be a combination of updating current connections playlists in the digital library, and it will also include some of our new focus connections playlists that will be launched in the fall. So we have 42 new focus connections playlists that will be available next fall, similar to the deliverable this year. So with those 36 playlists that we have, either new or updated connections playlists, we will have at least 3 resources per playlist. So that will be at least 108 instructional resources at this workshop. Some of those resources will be new. Some of them will be updated from previous resources in the digital library, and some will be light touches, some will be total makeovers. So those are our goals: 36 connections playlists and 108 resources. We will have support at the workshop for you. Specifically, we've rounded out our mathematics and literacy teams to have content support to help you dive into those playlists and the progressions. And so for mathematics, we have Antone Jackson from Washington, Diane Murata from Hawaii, and Terry Gibbsburg from Smarter Balance. And then for ELA and literacy, we have our two of our ELA claim leads. Denise is for research and Bonnie is for writing. They've joined us at the last few workshops to help us dive into the progressions and the content. And then we'll also have Natasha Johnson from Smarter Balance. Joining us to support accessibility, our very own Tricia Invitali will be joining us for this workshop, and then helping facilitate instructional resources will be Tanya, your go-to for instructional resources, and for connections playlists, Cassie will be helping. I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea.
Hello, everybody. So if you guys were with us in November, this slide might look familiar. So for our connections playlist and differentiated resources, we have 3 steps. The first one is to create the instructional overview, and to facilitate that process, we have Google Docs in your folder. And the Google Docs will have some instructions for the table leads to facilitate your table to go through and create the instructional overview. Again, the instructional overview includes things such as academic vocabulary, overview, teacher's notes, which we are calling things to consider. Step 2 is then to take that and do our performance progressions. And for that process, we have our Google Sheets. We've had our content leads go through the achievement level descriptors and item specifications and kind of simplify the process for you already. So feel free to go through that and look at it before Monday when we give you access. Amy, I believe we're giving them access on Sunday. And then
Yes, that's correct. I was trying to find unmute. I did put it in the chat box. They'll get access Sunday evening at the 5:15 meeting. And if you're unable to attend Sunday evening, that's totally okay. We'll give you access Monday morning.
And then once your table has kind of finished your performance progressions, you will look at the different topics within the performance progressions. And just to reiterate, the performance progressions are broken down by topic and then what students can do when they're below, near, and then above the target for that topic. And then you kind of want to look at the resource needs and kind of assign topics to each person at your table so that then they can go and create their differentiated resources the end of day 1, most likely the beginning of day 2, and then day 3. So as a team, again, you guys will be doing the connections playlist. 2 things that are new are the directions for Focused Connections playlist. Well, this one isn't really new. We just kind of forgot to call it out in November. So this is in the main folder. You'll have access on Sunday evening, called Connections Playlist Development February 2020 Shared Drive. And once you open that shared drive, you will see these 2 documents, the directions for the playlist and then the Connections Playlist Template Guide. So just like we have the template guide for the instructional resources, we asked CAS to create a template guide for our Connections playlist. So everyone will have access to these 2 documents. It would be a good idea to maybe just kind of look through them again on Sunday evening. I don't think the first one has been changed a little bit, and then obviously the second one is new.
And just to clarify, I think it's on a later slide. For those of you who are new, we do gather Sunday evening before the workshop. So whenever we're referencing Sunday evening, we don't mean this Sunday. We mean the Sunday before the workshop in San Diego. And if your flight is late, it's, again, okay if you can attend. We'll get you caught up Monday morning. But if you're there on Sunday, we'll meet at 5:15.
Amy, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so then once you go into your specific folder for the claim and target that your team will be working on, each folder for each team will have the Google Doc template for your playlist, the Google Sheet to facilitate the development of the performance progressions, and then a PDF of the item specifications for your claim and target. Those are A, B, and C, so you kind of see what they look like in the screenshot below. They're not in alphabetical order in the screenshot. And then some teams may have in their folder an older version of the playlist. So some teams are working on new playlists and some teams are working on old playlists. So if your team is an old playlist, you'll have the original to refer to once you start looking at the resources to update. Next slide, Amy. This is what the performance progressions will look like once your team is done. Again, we are organizing it by topic or theme, and then the above, near, below, and then the differentiated resources associated with each claim. So we really want to try and stick to 1 educator per claim, and that way we we have more resources for that claim and target for the different topics and themes. I know sometimes, especially in math, when the claim and target is, sorry, I'm trying to mute some people. When the claim and target reaches a lot of areas, it kind of makes sense to kind of differentiate within one topic and theme. But we want to fill in these gaps so that educators have at least one resource for each topic or theme.
Yes, and just to point out, one of the changes that we made when with this transition is you'll notice there's one resource per topic and claim. In the legacy playlist, there was a resource at the above, a resource at the near, and a different resource at the below. And the recommendation and feedback that we received from educators, and many of you, is that you wanted one resource that was differentiated across each of the progressions to use. So I did get that question recently, so I just wanted to reiterate that each of these resources needs to be differentiated at the above, near, and below to represent that claim and topic. So as we move to creating resources, we'll continue to create our resources in the Google Drive. This allows for multiple people to collaborate, to give feedback, and this really aids in the copy editing phase. And it helps with the virtual support post-workshop. So we'll continue to use Google Docs to create resources. Tanya has updated this step-by-step process for us, and that will be on the website that we will release on Sunday evening. When we are creating resources, you may have resources at your table that are brand new. So creating new resources, or you may be selecting from the digital library. We know that that was a little bit difficult, and there were different cases in November that were difficult. So remember that you can do a light remodel, or you can do a big overhaul. And we saw some great big overhauls on some of those resources that turned out really well. So creating new resources, you'll identify the resource need, as Chelsea said, based on the progression. We want to fill as many of the topics on the playlist as possible moving forward, and then you'll create a new resource using the template. Not you as the lead, your educator, you will help facilitate this. So Sunday arrival, here, the Sunday arrival in San Diego. If you're available to help us set up, we always love your help. We will start setting up at 4:45. We will start the leads and coaches meeting at 5:15. Cassie and Tanya will be leading this meeting. We'll be providing access to your folders at this time, and we're there to answer any questions. We also will have Denise and Bonnie there Sunday evening. I know that there was a lot of huddling going on, for example, with our editing team, so you can check in to see who has a similar connections playlist across grade levels. And I know that Bonnie wants to huddle with her. We have several, our ELA teams are focusing on writing, and so she'll be able to give some guidance with that as well. On Monday morning, please arrive early and be ready to help your team set up with tech. We ask educators to be in the room at 8:15 to get everything set up, making sure that they can log in and plug in. And then right then at 8:15, as you're setting up, get started with the get to know you activities, specifically the shape activity. Also on day one, when we get started Monday morning, the coaches will have, as teams get started on their connections playlist, Trisha and Vitali have some training for you, about 2 hours Monday morning, that will dive in a little bit more to accessibility, how to make accessible resources, reviewing the strategies, and also reviewing some coaching strategies. So that'll be on day one for the coaches at your table as we get started. At the end of each day, Monday and Tuesday, we'll continue to use the Padlet. So at 4 o'clock, you will stop working and review the Padlet questions with your team. And then at 4:15, Leads and staff will meet for 30 minutes to review the Padlet. If there's anything that we need to clarify and adjust for day 2, we'll call those out at that time. And then on Wednesday, the workshop ends at 1 p.m. We'll ask prior to leaving to complete the post-workshop survey. But if your flight is leaving later, please feel free to stay. I know it's helpful for educators if their lead is able to continue to help them after the day is ended. If your flight is leaving early, that's totally understandable. But we do have that optional work time that was requested from 1 to 4 p.m. on the final day. The next 2 slides are going to address 2 important pieces for instructional resource development. This first slide is on copyright. The next one is on creating accessible resources. As we're moving forward with the Tools for Teachers resources, we really need all the resources to be as original, educator created as possible. We understand that sometimes if you're getting a reading passage, you may need to get copyright permission, but we do have some great tips for how to create your own research passage. Matthew Cohen is great at that, and he's willing to help others as well. So we need to make sure that whenever we are using somebody else's materials or an idea that we're giving attribution. So we have a sample here of what that should look like. This is an example of a resource that was created in November, and it used the Kentucky Department of Education. And so we have this phrase here, this statement: this resource is an adaptation of fractions on a number line, grade 3 formative assessment lesson by the Kentucky Department of Ed, and is used under copyright license 4.0. You will be able to see this example in Tools for Teachers at the workshop. We will have a couple of resource numbers available for you so you can go directly to them. But really we need to make sure that we're creating original resources to put into the digital library.
And Amy, I'd like to add that sometimes it may not be appropriate to do the attribution and the overview. It might be more appropriate to do it in the step in which the resource is first mentioned, if it's just like a worksheet, and or on the resource itself. So if you modify a worksheet, I would attribute it in the step that it's mentioned, and then at the bottom of the worksheet itself, I would put that attribution phrase.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. And we'll be, available throughout the workshop. So definitely ask us questions with regard to attribution. We also have updated the copyright checklist, and so it goes through step by step to help you as well. Essentially, if I'm thinking about copyright, there's a resource that I co-created with another educator, and because it was originally his resource, I got copyright permission from him because it was his resource, and then I put it in to the digital library as an educator. But we want to avoid going to places like illustrative mathematics. I do not have a current open license with illustrative mathematics, so we do have the copyright license with Desmos for Desmos created resources. But if we are using any educator created resources, we do need to seek permission from those educators. So again, whenever possible, we need to really be making our own resources. And I'm moving to the next slide.
We just wanted to highlight again on how to create accessible documents. This is part of the updated training that everyone had to become recertified. So hopefully everyone either watched the webinar and or took the quiz, but we just want to make sure that our educators are using the headings in Word or Google Docs, that we're adding alternate text to images and graphics. And number 2, make sure that educators aren't really shying away from using images or graphics just because they're afraid to add alternate text. And we also don't want our coaches to be the ones who are adding alternate text to every image or graphic. So we want our coaches and table leads to really coach our educators in how to create alternate text. And again, we have Trish and Vitaly there to help make that process a little easier. Use simple tables, use correct color contrast, use the accessibility checker in Word and PDF, and then export PDF using the settings for accessibility. Again, the coaches will receive an advanced training on how to create accessible documents on Monday morning. It will be more advanced than what is on the training site. All right, so now we're going to go into our coaches, and we want to acknowledge that we purposefully combined the table lead and coach trainings because we want you guys to know each other, know each other's roles, and how to support one another. And as we improve and change, it's important that both sides know what's changed since you guys last attended a workshop. Sorry, I'm just reading
a couple of questions in the chat box. Yes, everything is still in Google Docs. We just have Word up there because it's a default, but yes, everything will be in Google Docs. And the next question is the reference sheet for accessible documents.
The reference sheet is on the training website, so educators can download it and save it to their desktop.
And then at least for the coaches, Tricia and Vitaly are going to do some side-by-side walkthroughs and help you guys navigate through. So to give you guys some more advanced training as well.
All right, so the role of our coaches are to support our educators in creating accessible and differentiated resources embedded with accessibility and culturally responsive teaching strategies. We need to make sure that there are at least 1 to 3 accessibility strategies in each resource, and that within the resource is differentiated for below, near, and above. And then a secondary role is to support the formative assessment process and then make sure that there are 1 to 3 formative assessment strategies embedded within each resource. One thing that kind of came to our attention after the last workshop is that we really need our educators to embed these things in the step-by-step and not when we ask them to list them in the accessibility or the formative assessment strategies section. Those sections are really just for them to list the names and not how or when they were used. So we want to call out how these were used again in the step-by-step. Sometimes, especially when it comes to culturally responsive teaching strategies, we don't have a predefined list or links that will be in tools for teachers. And so it may be more appropriate to have it in like the tips for teachers, but really it should be in the step-by-step.
I would just add that the secondary coaching role, and the reason we added this here is we're not trying to add to the coach's plate. So we don't want you to feel like, oh, you have to do this one more thing too. But it was more designed to say, if you identify something that they could add for formative assessment or give tips and coaching on that, we didn't want to say you can't. Like, I've been in classrooms where the educator, the para-educator, because of your role, you couldn't help certain students, or they tell you that. I never followed that rule. But we just wanted to let you know that if you see formative assessment strategies or suggestions that you could provide, because all of our coaches are experienced SNEs, we wanted to make sure that you knew that you had that option available.
And for you to change slides, Amy, another thing I wanted to highlight is that if we are suggesting or if an educator is using an accessibility strategy such as an illustration glossary, then they need to, and we need to support them in the creation of those materials. So if they have illustration glossaries, then they should provide an illustration glossary for the academic vocabulary within that resource. We will have this table available again, and it has all of the accessibility and formative assessment strategy names. Again, it's important that we spell it exactly how it is in this document because the Tools for Teachers website will link to it, and it needs to be spelled correctly in order for it to link correctly. One change is that we do not want educators to bold these strategies or link to the strategies because the website will do it for them. Something that's a little different from November is that when we have the electronic copy of this document, it will be linked to the strategies and tools for teachers, which is pretty exciting. Next slide, Amy. One of the most important roles of a coach is to provide feedback that's descriptive, specific to the educators on their development. So we can do feedback during pre-drafting as they're brainstorming how to create or modify a resource, during drafting by working side by side with the educator, or during drafting virtually in Google Docs where you can just kind of message the educator or do a suggestion or a comment in their Google Doc template. All of the resources on Tools for Teachers is 508 compliant, so we need to make sure that all of our resources are accessible. Please do not assign yourself to a table. We know that each coach has a different area of expertise, and so we really want to utilize that. And we're not coaching so much on, you know, content, math or English language arts content, but really accessibility strategies, differentiation, culturally responsive teaching. And so you should be able to do that regardless of the content. Now, if it is content specific, or if you don't know how to differentiate for a content that you may not be familiar with, then you can call upon one of your other coaches who might have more expertise in that. One thing that is a little different this time, we have a coaches section on the spreadsheet in, I believe it's phase 2, where you're going to add your name and the number of strategies that you were recommended or that they have in their resource, and then if you want any notes to the table lead just to help with communication. So we don't want to require you to write notes in this section, but if you need to communicate with the table lead and you're just at a different table, it's a good spot for you guys to keep in communication.
I just also want to call out that you do not see anywhere where the coach needs to review the resource after it's drafted. There was some misconceptions in November that the coach had to be the final reviewer or one of the final reviewers, that we believe that the coaching should be happening during the process. So again, in the brainstorming or at the workshop in the process. All right, so we are going to transition to table leads at this time. We have updated the table lead handbook that will be sent out to you on Friday, by the end of the day on Friday. This table lead handbook has become such an excellent resource. We update it with feedback from table leads after each workshop. One of our asks is that as a table lead, you'll receive the list of the people at your table. We haven't sent that out yet. We have cancellations that happen, or I need to change table team assignments based on cancellations. So we try to wait until a later time to send those out. So you'll get those on Friday, and you will get your table lead handbook on Friday as well. So that way it eliminates some of the confusion if somebody needs to change table teams. At this point, once we send out the list, we will not make any changes until we are in person at the event. And that usually doesn't happen, but every once in a while it will happen if we end up with only one educator at a table, or if a table lead isn't able to come. So we'll adjust on site if we need to. But prior to the workshop, we really ask table leads to reach out to your team. You'll have 3 educators just to send a pre-workshop communication in the table lead guide. there is a email drafted for you. So we ask that you use that. Of course, you can add your own personality and touch to it. And we ask that you send that out on Monday, welcoming your participant, just some reminders. And then you'll also send a reminder on Thursday with any other details. I know that this has been one of the things that we've gotten a lot of feedback on. New educators have really appreciated having that contact with someone before the workshop, remembering that we were all new once, and our first time, maybe we didn't know anybody at the workshop until Monday morning. So providing text, phone numbers and texting on Sunday is also very helpful. During the workshop, so at the table lead guide, we'll give you the before, the during, and the after for each day. During the workshop, your role will be to lead the discussions for the Connections playlist, and then your resource is to complete the Connections playlist. You will fill out the spreadsheet in Google Docs and support the SNEs as they fill out their sections. You'll provide reviews and coaching on the formative assessment process for them as well. So you'll really support all the stages of the resource development for what's needed for the playlist. And so we ask that you not work on a resource. So for example, maybe your playlist needs 4 resources, your 3 educators at the table have taken 3 and you're like, oh, this is a gap, I can do it too. We ask that you not take on a resource at the workshop. Now, if you would like to take on that additional resource and do a contract post-workshop, we can do that, but we need to make sure that as the lead, you are available to your educators throughout the process. And then at the end of each day, you'll facilitate the team debrief in Padlet, and then you will stay from 4:15 to 4:45 with us to debrief. There is an observation sheet that is very helpful. This helps our state leads in making future selections for workshop participants. And it also helps us identify future leads. So there is a SNE observation spreadsheet. So if there are gaps or problems or great skills and talents, we need to hear that so that it will help us make future selections for future workshops. After the workshop, we ask that you stay with your team for at least the first 2 weeks as they're finishing their resources. Some people will finish and submit at the workshop. A few people will need to be able to apply their final edits after the workshop. So we'll ask that as the table lead, you follow up with them post-workshop. On Wednesday, you'll develop a post-workshop plan with your team, let them know when you'll check in with them, and then follow through on that. At the 2-week mark, Tanya will reach out and check to see if you need somebody to fill in. If sometimes we have leads decide to hand off because of busy schedules, and that's totally understandable and acceptable. Some people just want to stay with the resource because it's almost there, or they've already given feedback, so they just want to see it out. Please make sure that post-workshop you are using that Google Docs to fill out the notes section in the spreadsheet, because this is very helpful for us when we're tracking resources that don't come in on time, or if we do need to hand off at that 2-week mark, it helps the new lead take over.
Amy, there's a question in the chat box if whether they will know if their table participants are new or returning.
That would be lovely, Shelley, but no, I don't have that marked, I'm sorry. But you are more than welcome to ask them in that introductory email.
And then Amy, I wanted to add something before we go to the next slide, really for coaches. We forgot to add a slide for it, but you guys will have, it's kind of like a handbook, we're calling it a guide. It will tell you what is a coach, who will you support, what is your role, and then it will give you some tips on how to support for accessibility, differentiation, and culturally responsive teaching strategies, and then tips to provide feedback, and then just suggestions overall and how to ask guiding questions to support SNEs in a way that facilitates the feedback process. So that will be sent Friday afternoon with the recording and the table lead handbook.
Thank you, Chelsea. I do want to add, as a follow-up to Shelley's question with regard to new or returning the training, that when you're asking if they completed the training, just a reminder that all participants, new and returning, are required to do the recertification of the SNE training because it has been updated and it's new. So that's a good opportunity to ask if they've completed their training and to ask if they are new or returning. Contracts. So we'll talk more about contracts this afternoon in the webinar, but wanted to let you know that contracts are available for resources. So we are able to do the connections playlist resource for the table leads, and then the instructional resources are for the educators. We do not anticipate post-workshop time for coaches, so we do not have coaches contracts for post-workshop time. If we do get a number of educators that sign up for post-workshop resources, which is an option, we may have a few limited coaching contracts that can support that virtual development. But since it's at the workshop and it's regular contracted days, we do not have contracts for coaches. In the summer, when it's not a regular contract day, it's a little different. We also wanted to see who's interested, if you can. We know there are a lot of people on the call. We want to open up some contract opportunities to you, to our table leads, and to our coaches. As you know, we are transitioning to Tools for Teachers. In the Tools for Teachers website, we have all of the playlists and resources that were created in November. But we do need to add, we are currently in the process of building a new resource authoring tool in TIMS. For those of you who are part of the resource authoring teams, you might have familiarity with TIMS. It's the site that's used to add the items for testing. We're building a new resource authoring site within TIMS. And so we need to add all of the resources that we created last summer in June and July. So some of those resources need a light touch with the strategies that have been added. So as you may remember, we didn't have the strategies for both June and July. We actually developed the accessibility strategies in June, and we created the formative strategies, I believe, in July. So all of the resources will need to make sure that we have the strategies embedded in the resource as you're putting them into TIMS. But for the most part, these resources have been created already. So we have two opportunities, again, for leads and coaches. Because of your experience, we're limiting the opportunity to you. But there will be an opportunity for contracts to add resources to TIMS, and then the opportunity to continue to fill instructional resource gaps. So as you know, we weren't able to fill every resource on a playlist, and so we want to fill some of those gaps as well before the grand opening in the fall. So if you're interested, we will ask again, but we would love to get a sampling understanding of who may be interested in one of these contracts or doing multiple contracts for resource development. So if you'd like to throw your name in the chat box, that would be fabulous. And then we'll make sure to connect with you at the workshop with some more information. Awesome. So again, we'll have more information as we come, but we just definitely, we need help. And then the other reason why we also wanted to open this up to leads and coaches is because we will be launching the new resource authoring tool. And we want to give you guys that first look and practice in using the resource authoring tool before we launch it at a full event. Awesome. So thank you for putting your names in the chat box. We will get those down before we log off. We want to invite you to go ahead and come off mute at this time, or feel free to type names in the chat box. If you have any questions, we did not mention during this call that Superhero Day is Tuesday, but this nice, cute picture animation is that fun reminder that we will continue with our theme day on Tuesday. And our theme day is Superhero Day, so please wear your favorite superhero costume or your super teacher costume. Awesome. Thank you all for putting your names in the chat box. We will definitely be reaching out for these contracts. Any questions moving forward? We do have a webinar this afternoon, which is the pre-workshop webinar, but any specific questions on being a coach or being a table lead, and any feedback on having the meeting together at the same time?
Just to answer a question in the chat box, the next webinar is today at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And we're talking about Sunday evening before the workshop for coaches, table leads, and other leads to get together and just kind of prep and then just go over some details with Cassie and Tanya leading that.
Hi, this is Shelly. I really liked having this as a combined training. I think that it's helpful to know what the role of the coaches is when you are a table lead, and probably vice versa for the coaches, but I'm just speaking as a table lead.
Thanks, Shelly. And we will send out both handbooks in that email on Friday, so you'll have access to both if you want to see vice versa. We do have some coaches who are former table leads and vice versa. So depending on the need of the workshop and your expertise, we may call on you to be one or the other with your leadership and your experience. So thank you.
Hi, Amy. This is Jen. I was wondering about...
Jen, can you speak up a little?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me better now?
Just barely.
Uh-oh. Okay, I'll put it in the chat box.
Okay, sorry. All right, as we're waiting, oh, here we go. So won't be at the meeting Sunday evening. If you're not able to meet the meeting Sunday evening, have been requests, can we get our folders sooner? We cannot do the folders sooner than Sunday, but we can meet with you Monday morning at 8 to make sure that you can get into your folder and have access. We'll be down there early. Breakfast starts at 7:30, so we will be down there early. But yes, we can get you access to your folder Monday morning at 8 a.m. I hope that answers the question. Awesome, thanks, Jen. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to be here today. And for those of you who are listening, thank you for preparing for the workshop. We're excited to see you in San Diego. And we'll see many of you online later today at 4 p.m. Pacific for the pre-workshop webinar for all participants. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Chelsea, I'm going to copy the